Houston Sports Talk back into the video day, and today we're going to be previewing the Houston Texans Week 5 matchup against the Buffalo Bills. This will be a very fun one for the Houston Texans, debuting the new city jerseys. Also, Stephon Diggs facing his former team, but even though it's going to be a fun matchup, I'm intrigued. I know the guys are intrigued to go out there and get this matchup in, especially Stephon Diggs, and all the fans are very excited for this matchup. And to have back-to-back games at Energy is awesome. First time this season. The Texans started off the road in week 1, had a home game in week 2, road game week 3. These last 2 weeks now at home, so first home stretch of the year, but the Texans will go back on the road next week in New England, so back-to-back matchups against AFC East teams. But, this is a big one for the Texans because, right now, the way things have played out this season, the Bills look like the top team in the AFC East. I mean, even though it was a tough performance last week against Baltimore, even though it was a bad performance, Miami looks terrible. New England, I think they could get a win this week against Miami just because they're facing Miami, but New England looks terrible. New York at times has looked pretty solid, and we'll see how they do this morning against the Vikings for the London game. But still, I think the Bills have looked better than the Jets so far, but it's early. But right now, it looks like the Bills could be a division winner if things keep up in that division. And for the Texans, it looks that way too. The Jaguars have been horrendous. The Titans have been horrendous. The Colts, they're 2-2. They've been pretty solid, but right now the Texans hold the tiebreaker with them, and their quarterback keeps getting injured. So, I'm not too worried about the Colts either. I think right now both of these two teams are favorites to be the winners of their division, so that's why this is important. If both these teams are going to be at the top at the end of the season, then a tiebreaker would matter between the two of them. Because these could be two of the top seeds at the end of the year. So, really hope the Texans go out there and get a win today. But I'm going to say this, I'm going to criticize my favorite team a little bit here. But if the Texans play the way they did last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars, they will not win this game. If the Texans go out there and play the way they did against the Jaguars, they will get their butts kicked by this Buffalo Bills team. I thought there were some good things that the Texans did last week. C.J. Stroud made some incredible throws. Nico Collins made some incredible catches. The defense did their job at times, but there were a lot of struggles defensively. Loved the fourth down stop. The defense did some good things. It's not like there wasn't anything good that the defense or offense did, but there were too many mistakes in that game. Mainly the offensive line with the penalties, Laremy Tunsil, all the false starts and all the holdings. And Tunsil's a problem. That's one thing. And people will attack Tunsil. I'll attack Tunsil. But it's not just Tunsil. Last week it was the entire offensive line. Holding, false starts, it was terrible. And the one thing that definitely gains me more confidence in C.J. Stroud, even though that O-line was trying to lose the Texans the ball game, C.J. Stroud did everything he could to give the Texans that win last weekend and played his ass off. He played extra hard with the way the offensive line was treating him and his offense. So if the offensive line could do better for CJ this week and this Texans offense, then the Texans will win, and they will win easier. They won't have to fight the way they did against Jacksonville. But if the O-line is terrible yet again, the Texans, I think, will be in a fighting position, but I don't see the Texans winning this game if the O-line doesn't improve. And I think that has probably been on DeMeco Ryan's head. That's been in his mind all week. And I'm sure they've been working on the offensive line being better, Laremy Tunsil being better. So honestly, another thing, just saying it as a fan, I think it gets better for the Texans. I hope it gets better. I'm going to predict and say the offensive line still struggles a bit, but I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was in Jacksonville. I really don't. We're going to probably see a traditional Laremy Tunsil false start, or 2 or 3 maybe. but there was a ton of holdings, more than usual, and there were there was probably the same amount of false starts, but there were way too many holdings. So this offensive line has to be better. I mean, they're not really allowing a sack. I think Stroud got sacked maybe once last weekend, so it's not that type of problem. I mean, years and years ago for Deshaun Watson, that was a big problem. Funny enough, I've been watching some old Texans highlights from the 2018 year when they won 9 straight games, that unbelievable season. And Deshaun Watson was sacked so many times. It's a completely different offensive line problem. Back then, the offensive line problem was, our quarterback, Deshaun, was just absolutely getting killed. He was getting attacked. That's not really the problem for CJ. Sure, he'll see his traditional pressures, but this is more of the problem of the fact that the offensive line is getting too many holdings, too many false starts, which that was a little bit of a problem with Deshaun Watson. But the main problem with Deshaun Watson when he was our quarterback was with the offensive line was the amount of sacks they allowed. That's not really a problem with this offensive line, especially with Laramie Tunsil protecting Stroud. So I guess that is a good thing, but it isn't really a good thing with the amount of false starts and the holdings they get. But let's go over some injuries. Jerry Hughes is on IR. Aziz Al-Shahir is questionable with an illness. That could be a tough blow if he's ruled out. The Texans really need him. He's so tough for our defense. Derek Barnett is out, so that's another tough blow. Joe Mixon is out again. That sucks. Sorry, fantasy owners of Joe Mixon. Kurt Hinish is on IR with a calf injury. Titus Howard is questionable. He was one of those guys that was getting some penalties thrown his way. Robert Woods is questionable. This wouldn't be as big of a hit as it would have been last week. Tank Dell is supposed to be back for the Texans. So if this was last week with Tank Dell being out, having Robert Woods out would have hurt with him being the wide receiver 3 with Tank Dell out. But now Tank Dell's back. I'm not saying if the Robert Woods were not to play with the foot injury that it's like nothing to the Texans because he's still the wide receiver 4. But he doesn't have as much as a role as he did last week. Jake Hansen is questionable with a back injury. Dylan Horton is questionable with illness, leukemia. And he hasn't played at all this year. He just got activated and returned to practice. I don't know if he plays. I would doubt it, but he's definitely heading that direction, which is amazing. Christian Harris is still in IR. His expected return was supposed to be week 5, but he's not playing this week. Damian Pierce is questionable, but they've already announced he's not supposed to play. The Bills got some injuries on their own too. Taylor Rapp, free safety, has a concussion. He's out. Ed Oliver, defensive tackle's out, so 2 blows to the defense. Khalil Shakir is out with an ankle injury. Their number 1 wide receiver, so Keon Coleman's gonna have to step up. I got him in fantasy, but he's on my bench, not just because of the fact that he's facing the Texans, but there's other reasons. Terrell Bernard is questionable with a pec injury. Another very good player on their defense. At the same time, even though they're taking these blows defensively, on the injury list, there's some deep depth on their defense. So missing those guys that they have like Rapp and Oliver who are officially out, and Bernard who's questionable, their loss will hurt, but they have a really deep defense. So even with those guys out, the Texans are still facing a really solid defense. So we're going to have to see the best from C.J. Stroud and Nico Collins. Of course, Stephon Diggs going up against his former team as well. And the offensive line has to be better. For my prediction, I'm going to go with the Texans winning. I never really picked the Texans to lose. To me, this feels like a potential loss, but my brain tells me the Texans might lose this game, but my heart tells me the Texans will win. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, and peace out. Go Texans.